So let's begin the presentation. Just going to share my screen and a quick check to make sure that you're able to see that. Can someone please let me know? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, welcome to today's open house for the zoning code rewrite and code amendments for 2020-2021. There are several staff that are going to be presenting today. We are currently situated in City Hall, so we're also meeting with people in person today. And let's talk about some of the logistics. So today's presentation will involve both a virtual and a recorded opportunity to hear from staff. Also, we will have open times for questions and answers. We will talk about the project components and the amendments that are associated with them. Regarding the open house, there are several staff representing both the Redmond Zoning Code, but also Redmond 2050, which is the periodic amendment to an update to the city's comprehensive plan. Reminder, we are recording for those of you that just joined us, and this recording will be posted to the Redmond Zoning Code project webpage by the end of this week. Today's agenda will include an introduction of the Zoning Code Rewrite project as a whole, as well an introduction and check-in with the status of Redmond 2050. We will also, pardon me, my computer, there we go, okay. We will also talk through the major components of the Redmond Zoning Code rewrite. There are 7 primary components that I'll introduce in a moment, as well as a few additional items that are being taken forward in combination for a more comprehensive story, as well as efficiencies while our city leadership and Planning Commission and City Council review these items. And again, we will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Let's begin with an overview. The Redmond Zoning Code rewrite is a multi-year, multi-phase project. You can see here that we are in phase 1 of the rewrite. This phase is emphasizing building a solid foundation so that in years to come, there will be a clear, concise, and effective code, one that is efficient for customers as well as for staff as they are reviewing applications for development. The second phase is also underway at this time. Staff is beginning to consider those elements that will help continue to rebuild the code. That process will be formally getting underway in the next quarter or two so that stakeholders, those who are interested in the code, will have an opportunity to see at a conceptual phase and all the way through the formal review what is being proposed. Later in the phases in 3 and 4, you can start to see some of the topics that are more robust, and these are in alignment with the comprehensive plan update. So in essence, phase 1 and phase 2 are helping the code prepare and organize so that when more significant changes are needed for consistency with city policy, that the code will be ready in order to incorporate those changes. And throughout all of the phases, we are using a very robust communication process, internally, including with technical staff, and externally with people who represent property owners, developers, businesses, and others. If you are not already part of the stakeholder team or a party of record, please let us know. We'd be happy to add you. The rewrite takes its direction first from the comprehensive plan. The city's development regulations must be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan in order to carry out the city's vision and its policies. But as well, we look to the community strategic plan, an annual or biennial document that allows the city to prioritize for work programs some of those aspects that need to be emphasized within a given year. They can be priorities identified by the community, but they can also be priorities identified at the state level, for example, affordable housing. So this year, with the first phase, the focus is on streamlining the code, making sure that it is clear and concise, addressing several priorities that the city has, such as in response to COVID-19, and also make sure that as we go forward in changing the code and trying to organize it a little bit better, that we avoid breaking the code and creating more inconsistencies. These are the 7 components of the code, and I will go through each of these today. But as well, I mentioned earlier, for efficiency, we are including something called the annual code cleanup. That's an opportunity for fixing minor errors or inconsistencies in the code. And we are also including some bridge amendments in the Overlake and Marymore Design District neighborhoods. We'll tell you more about these in a moment. The code rewrite has been underway for an entire year to get us to this point today. Today, we did receive a recommendation from the city's technical committee to take the project forward with the Planning Commission's and City Council's formal review. To get us to this point, staff has worked internally across all of the departments, but also externally with the stakeholders and with the community to explain some opportunities for conceptual improvements, then to form them a little bit better and get feedback on draft amendments, and then finally to hear from the community and stakeholders on the actual amendments that are going forward. We anticipate that the City Council will review this package in the first quarter of 2022. So now let's start by hearing from the Redmond 2050 team. Jeff Churchill is going to present today.
Kim, can you let me know that you can hear me through your headphones? You can? Good. And I'm going to turn on my camera. And Kim, will you also advance the slides for me? Perfect. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Churchill. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager. It's good to see those of you here in the room and those online. If I look over my shoulder, that's because that's where the slides are. I'm here today to briefly describe a separate but related multi-year planning effort that I hope you will take an interest in and get involved in and tell your friends and neighbors about. And what I'm talking about is Redmond 2050, the periodic review and update of the Redmond Comprehensive Plan. This is important work that has profound effects for how we experience Redmond and day-to-day life in Redmond, and I'm going to share why that is and how you can get involved. The next slide. So this slide shows the planning hierarchy in Washington State. The Redmond Comprehensive Plan, shown in the second to bottom row, articulates the community's vision and sets policies to achieve that vision. It guides the day-to-day decision-making of elected officials and city staff. And what you'll notice is that our community vision is informed by laws and policy mandates that come from higher levels of government. The state sets overall planning goals and requirements in the Growth Management Act. The region adopts a regional version of a comprehensive plan called Vision 2050, and King County adopts countywide planning policies that govern countywide planning matters. Redmond's plan must be consistent with all of these other documents. And in turn, the Redmond Comprehensive Plan guides the development of zoning regulations like those in the Redmond Zoning Code that you'll hear a lot about today, and also functional plans like the Transportation Master Plan, neighborhood plans, and strategic plans like the upcoming Human Services Strategic Plan. Can we go to the next slide? So this slide illustrates how the comprehensive plan affects day-to-day life in Redmond. And the top row shows the comprehensive plan policies. Those are the community goals and policies. And those lead to citywide regulations, plans, and programs. For example, those land use and zoning regulations that are the main focus of today, plans like the water system plan, but also the transportation master plan, the park plan, and programs like neighborhood traffic safety, but also human services programs, recreation programs, and many others. This impacts life in Redmond, clearly. What kind of land use and zoning regulations are on the books affects what kind of development is allowed where you live, where you work, where you recreate. The water system plan, for example, ensures that the city has a future supply of clean water. And the neighborhood traffic safety program works with neighbors to help design and operate safer streets. So can we go to the next slide? So there's a lot of flow charts and hierarchy diagrams in this slideshow. Here's another one. And it is, and the only reason I put it up here is that it gives a lot more detail about what the scope of Redmond 2050 is. The darker yellow boxes are those topics that we're covering during phase 1 of the plan update. The blue boxes are those addressed in phase 2. And the lighter yellow boxes are being addressed in both phase 1 and phase 2. And then environmental review and community involvement is occurring throughout the plan update. We'll go to the next slide, Kim. I do want to share a little bit about what we've heard so far in Redmond 2050 from community members, but just keep in mind this one slide represents many hundreds of contacts or more, and a lot more details available online. So we've been asking, where should growth go in the future? What about Redmond is important to keep? What characteristics? What do we need to do better? And what should new buildings look like? And we've used a variety of methods to reach people, and those are shown on the slide as well. And what we've heard, a sampling of what we've heard, is that people love that Redmond is safe and has a strong parks and outdoor recreation opportunities. Community members in the future want Redmond to have more affordable housing and a strong transportation system that connects to the light rail stations that are under construction now. On the other hand, community members told us that there are not enough small businesses, and those that are here are struggling to maintain their locations. And they also are worried about the cost of housing in the future, that it could remain too high, and that Redmond could lose small businesses in the future as well. Can we go to the next slide? So we've organized the update to the comprehensive plan, the Redmond 2050 work, around 3 themes, and those are resiliency, sustainability, and equity and inclusion. And we're going to use these themes to evaluate proposed policy updates by developing what we're calling thematic lenses. You can think of them as lenses, I guess, through which we review policy updates to make sure that any updates that we're making are going to be supportive of these themes. So I'm going to share all the definitions of these themes with you because they're important and because they're foundational to the work. And those are on the next few slides. So equity and inclusion, these definitions that you see, by the way, are the result of a community input process over the last few months that went from kind of initial working definitions, and we're calling these kind of draft 2.0 because we don't know if these are ever fully set. But this is kind of the second draft that's reflective of what we've heard so far. Equity, the city provides all community members with equal and effective city services, resources, opportunities, and influence so that all people achieve their full potential and thrive. Equity is a purposeful and eager journey toward well-being as defined by those most negatively affected. Inclusion means the city treats all people respectfully, values all people for their distinctive skills, experiences, and perspectives, engages all people to contribute to the community's success, and leverages resources and city services where needed. And sustainability is on the next slide. And the definition we have in Redmond 2050 is meeting the needs of current and future generations and advancing environmental conservation, economic prosperity, and a high quality of life for all. And then finally, resiliency is ensuring that the community as a whole is prepared for, able to adapt to, and can recover effectively from disruptive conditions. And so the next slide is my plea, it's my ask. I very much hope you will get involved, and I have 2 requests for you. First is to go online and sign up for Redmond 2050 newsletters. That's really the best way to stay engaged with what's happening. There is a newsletter, I think, coming out today, in fact. So if you sign up right now, you'll get it this afternoon. Second, complete the questionnaire that is live right now. If you go to the website, you'll be able to get right into it on the topics of housing, transportation, and economic vitality. We want to hear what's most important to you. This will be going on, as I said, it's a multi-year process. It'll wrap up in 2024, but your participation now and in the coming years is very important to us. So thank you very much. And I believe I'm turning it over to Dave or Sarah or Kim.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, we're going to have Sarah Pyle join us. Sarah is the manager of the Economic Development Division under Planning and Community Development. And she's going to tell us a little bit about code maintenance as well as some of the strategic revisions to the code that are coming forth.
Kim, can you hear me okay? Kim, are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. So as part of our rewrite, and this actually started a few years ago, is an annual code cleanup docket. So this is making sure that we have a living zoning code that doesn't become outdated again over time. So we are in the middle of a rewrite process for the first time in a decade. In addition to that, though, we don't want to end up waiting a decade to address problems that have transpired in our code due to inconsistencies or changes in policy development, changes in legislation, or errors that our customers and staff mutually have found. To resolve that, we've implemented an annual code cleanup that is updated more than 127 minor changes, errors, or legislative changes that have been mandated to the city in the last couple of years. And this year, we have some additional corrections that are being made, some that reference other regulations, consistency with comp plan policy updates that are currently underway, terminology changes that are meant for transparency and consistency with the federal, state, and local laws, and then legislative changes again, which is a common annual update that will be required that have been mandated to the city. Some additional code cleanup components include parking near frequent transit. So there's a requirement that the city, all cities in Washington, reduce parking requirements near certain distances from high capacity transit lines. Sign code updates and corrections. Our street tree list is being updated after several years. And then the Redmond Town Center and master plan sunset updates to the zoning code and clarification of what is an alteration. We're going to walk through each one of these, or I believe Town Center. And Kim, is it okay if I go ahead and walk through at least the Town Center?
Yes, let's
cleanup
move
one,
back.
just because.
Yes, thank you.
I think the other ones are pretty self-explanatory, but for just clarity and transparency, the city adopted into its zoning code in 1995 and 1998 private entitlement conditions. So there was a private entitlement placed on Redmond Town Center, and the city adopted into the public regulations private entitlement conditions. That entitlement expired in 2005, actually, and so this is a long overdue cleanup of removing any of those private entitlement conditions and making refinements necessary so that the code is consistent with what the current entitlements are for that site. And so it does not change any of the requirements that were put in place that were any type of mitigations from the EIS at the time. So as an example, one of the common questions we've gotten is, what about the open space that was set aside? That was a requirement and a mitigation piece of the EIS that was done for Redmond Town Center. That is not removed from the code. That stipulation is not removed. That open space is indefinitely part of the city. Next up is strategic revisions. Most of these revisions are in alignment with city priorities that have come forward, or as Kim mentioned, with the community strategic plan and comprehensive plan updates. They are items that are particularly priorities in the work plan at this time, and therefore relevant for code update during this phase of the rewrite. First being Redmond Town Center zoning incentives, floor area ratio, administrative design flexibility, temporary use permits, and parking at existing and older structures in the downtown. For the Redmond Town Center, there's comprehensive plan policies currently in place that have allowed incentives to be placed for additional height in the Redmond Town Center in response to or in exchange for certain amenities that are, there's specific wording, I'm failing me, I know, but they have to be far above and beyond traditional amenities in order to gain additional height. So this strategic revision would allow an incentive provision to be put in place that focuses on high quality amenities that are specific to our community strategic plan. So they're related to environmental, they're related to affordable housing, they're related to preserving our small businesses in exchange for additional height in Redmond Town Center. simplification and consolidation of FAR information in Overlake and Marymore. Both of these zones, I think on the next slide, will do a good job demonstrating this. Both of them displayed all of the FAR information, which is floor area ratio, in a number of ways that is a little bit varied from other areas of the code and did not always provide a clear and transparent outline of what the maximum density was in a zone. So the FAR is being updated, the tables are being updated to reflect what the new approach will be. So instead of what you see to the left, it will now look a little bit more straightforward on the right. As you can see on the left, it appears on one part of the table that the max FAR might be 4, and then you look at another part of the table and you realize maybe that it's 5.35, and it's kind of like, which is it? And it really depends on a number of factors. So in the new table, it'll be a little bit more direct in providing clarity on what type of uses garner how much FAR and what the maximum combined FAR for a site could be. Next is administrative design flexibility. So updating the criteria, providing a clarity, more alignment with comprehensive plan, identifying when the authority should be extended to the DRB or when it should be extended to another decision maker, providing more alignment in decision authority with the permitting, the underlying permit types, and clarifying the direction, and then also enhancing and including additional definitions where there was a lack of clarity before. And temporary uses. This section amends temporary uses to allow for more flexibility for future emergencies, an additional set of approval processes for permits that meet certain requirements, additional temporary uses that are not listed, so being able to incorporate other uses as determined by the administrator if they are not listed, and some processing clarifications and extension criteria. As an example, currently the city has 2 options. One is allowed for 6 months and the other requires a $20,000 permit to be approved by council and to be used for greater than 6 months. So the update would allow short-term or seasonal options to be done as a type 1, which is approved by a designee of the department, type 2 to be approved by the technical committee and department directors, and then anything greater than 18 months would still need to go to council and have a review and mitigation measures and conditions put in place. This also includes some additional flexibilities of uses and then exemptions that were not clearly stated previously. And then parking for older structures in downtown. We have some unique sites in the downtown, and as we are doing system improvements from our functional plans or redevelopments of sites that are providing benefits and infrastructure to our downtown, it also means that some of these sites that have some unique property line configurations end up with non-compliant parking at sometimes from the city's doing of infrastructure improvements even, or other work being done. And so these updates would make sure that we are not creating non-compliant situations for development when we are doing city capital improvements, and for other sites in the downtown that are redeveloping would allow flexibility with current parking lots that are shared or joint use.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's move on to some of the other primary components of the rewrite. The first one is format and organization. So for those of you that use the code today, you might realize that you need to look at several different parts of the code in order to find the information that you are needing to, pardon me for a second, there we go. Okay. The format and organization allows for the wayfinding of where code exists today, so that as you are navigating the code and looking for those pieces that are pertinent to your application, that you'll be able to locate those. Now, this component is broken into 2 phases. So the first one, wayfinding this year, and then next year, what we hope to do is start to move those pieces around, and the wayfinding tools would, of course, be updated. This can help provide clarity and conciseness, also improve the timeliness of your review of the code itself, and then staff's review of your application. And then finally, it can help ensure that in an application that there are fewer errors or inconsistencies because you'll be able to easily locate the code. So here you can see the first example. In the code, you will see a new table provided that provides the initial step of wayfinding. In this example, landscaping would be selected from this table in order to click through and navigate to this table, which is sitting on the city's webpage. Now, this table would be specific to a zone like here, R5, and it is topic specific. So again, we're talking about landscaping in this example. And then you would see all of the landscaping codes that might apply to your application. Of course, every application is different, and so not everything would apply every single time. But in this scenario, you will be able to, at minimum, know where to look to confirm whether a particular section of code applies or not. And then finally, by using that table, you would navigate to the actual zoning code. So here you can see we've navigated right into the landscape standards through a 2-click process. And we hope that this is providing helpful wayfinding during this current year. And then again, in the second year, we look forward to starting to condense those separate pieces that over the past 10 years have evolved and created a little bit extra time need when you are trying to review the code during your application. Residential typology is the next component. Now, this one is intending to provide more alignment with the housing action plan that the city has developed over the past 2 to 3 years. The residential use typology is intending to broaden the opportunities for different types of housing to be built in the city. Now, it is not changing density. It is not changing the way that density would be implemented. But what it is doing in this year is introducing new forms of housing that could be built today. But for clarity purposes, we want to call those out. We also want to use this as an opportunity to collect and condense different types of information related to residential development. And we would do that through an informational handout that I'll show you in a moment. The particular the types of housing that we are proposing to include and clarify for this year are tiny homes, that would be the smallest form of a residential unit, stack flats, and courtyard apartments. There would be definitions to help provide the clarity for what these are. So you can see here that the courtyard apartments and stack flats will be introduced into the code with their specific regulations as to how they would be implemented in the zone in which they'd typically be allowed based on density. You can see here an example of a courtyard apartment. That would be something new that is not called out in the code today, though it could be in fact constructed. Also on the right side, you can see a type of stacked flats. Now, this might be considered a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, but it also could be considered a stacked flat based on the type of construction that is taking place inside. This would be the equivalent of a handout. And here you can see how examples of the different types of residential development are being provided. Also examples of floor area, floor plans rather. And then further down in this handout would be the zones in which someone could develop or in which, as a resident, you might anticipate seeing this type of development at this density and this form. There would also be a high-level overview of some of the key regulations that would also apply, such as open space and landscaping treatments. Accessory dwelling units are also an opportunity for better alignment with the Housing Action Plan. So in this case, we are hoping to clarify the code that is in place today. Accessory dwelling units are permitted today. However, the state has also asked that cities address their code and remove provisions regarding ownership occupancies for those accessory dwelling units that are rented at a long term. And in this case, that would be a 12-month lease. There was also the added provision for tiny homes to be used. Of course, again, tiny homes could be used today as an ADU, but we want to clarify that this is one form of ADU that might help provide more affordability throughout the city. The sizing of an ADU is also important. Today, our code can be a little bit confusing. And so one of the things we're going to do is to improve the definition for the ADU to make it clear, to incorporate those occupancy standards that have been addressed at the state level and now need to be addressed at the city level, and then also to address the maximum unit size and explain how that can be easily calculated based on the size of lot. We are also looking to improve the opportunity for businesses to locate in Redmond through the non-residential allowed uses. So in this case, our goal is to simplify the long list of uses that are currently allowed in the city by rolling them up into broader use categories and thereby creating more opportunity and flexibility for businesses not only to locate in Redmond, but to remain in Redmond over their life and to possibly move between different zones as they grow and change to meet the needs of their customers. In our allowed uses tables, we want to make sure that people can clearly understand where a type of use would be allowed. And so we are broadening the type of flags that we provide, which would include permitted, limited, conditional, and not permitted. We want to also align better with the building code and the fire code and our business licensing so that when a person comes into the city to pursue a business license or to provide a new business and a new structure in Redmond, that they would be having a similar conversation among the different departments that will help them along the way. And finally, to continue in that realm of improving and providing more opportunity, we are introducing more uses, more types of business opportunities, such as artisanal manufacturing. And this is a hybrid of light manufacturing, for example, a letterpress, along with the display, sales, and possibly even some servicing that would be provided. And that could be placed in the downtown or Overlake. And it would also, of course, be allowed in places like the manufacturing districts. Here you can see an example of how this will be achieved. The first is that we are introducing a new table that is a crosswalk between the former uses or the uses today and the new uses so that you can understand if you were looking for something called general sales and service that you might have applied for in the past, that is being rolled up into something called retail sales. And then also on the right side in the right table, you can see the artisanal manufacturing that would be allowed. In this case, it would be allowed in the downtown. Now I'd like to introduce David Lee. He is a manager with the current planning division, and he's going to talk about amendments to the Overlake and Marymore Design District.
Sound check. Kim, can you?
You're good.
Okay. Hello, my name is David Lee, planning manager, and I'll be working on the bridge amendments for this upcoming code cycle. The reason we're doing the bridge amendments is it's a preliminary remedial change to the Overlake and Marymore design districts to allow for development while a more robust review and outreach can occur during the Redmond 2050 project that Jeff had mentioned earlier. The proposed Overlake amendments include modifications to the incentive program, modifications to height calculations, and modifications to the building overhang and modulations that occur over the right-of-way. The Overlake incentives are proposed to be changed as well as part of this package. These are housed in RZC 2112.170. The purpose of the incentives is to provide a way for developers to go beyond the base FAR and height. Developers generally construct city amenities or infrastructure such as parks, stormwater facilities, affordable housing, and other types of plaza amenities throughout the OB. In return, the city allows for more density and heights. The first tier and second tier of incentives are an important part of this incentive package. As mentioned, the first tier is the more important amenities that the city is looking for, while the secondary tiers offer a suite of different types of smaller amenities. These only occur within the Overlake Village zones. The reason why we need to go back to these overlay incentives is because the incentives that are listed have been built out, are inapplicable, or out of context with the needs of the city. This also brings the code amendments, or sorry, the zoning code closer to alignment with city goals and visions. So as part of these incentives, we did have some further clarification on that the first tier of incentives must be implemented. The first tier has also been changed to add LEED Zero certification or equivalent. And if you were to do this, if you were to implement LEED Zero, that's the only priority incentive that you need to do. We also added in a tiered version of LEED certifications or green building or equivalent to reach that second tier of incentives. In terms of the second tier incentives, we moved the plaza dedication improvements down to the second tier. And we also added language for dedicated local commercial or affordable commercial space. In terms of the Overlake Height Amendment, go back one, there we go. In terms of the Overlake Height Amendment, this was needed to accommodate for shallow water or shallow groundwater in the Overlake Village. This basically essentially allows you to take the stories that were needed subterranean, put it on top of your building to a max of 3 stories above the maximum height limit in that particular zone. Part of this as well is caveats to this is that the above ground structures need to be future proof so that they can be converted to future usable space if parking is no longer needed in the future. Additionally, we would only approve this with a parking reduction reduced down to the very bare minimum. In terms of the Overlake Village overhang amendments, this is to further align our zoning code with public works standards and also with different sections of our own zoning code. This essentially removes building overhangs and projections over the right-of-way. Next up is the MDD incentives. The reasoning for having these incentives are the same exact reasoning for the Overlake Village. Again, they're the provided mechanism to go above and beyond the FAR height, while also getting amenities for the city and its residents. Just like the OV, we have a first tier and a secondary tier of incentives. And the reasoning for changing this is because the incentives have been built out, are inapplicable, or out of context with the city's needs. So again, these MDD incentives they mirror the OV incentives very closely. We've added the LEED Zero certification to the first tier, also added different levels of LEED certification or green building or equivalent to be able to reach that second tier. And we've also moved, just like in the OV, moved the plaza incentives out of that incentives. The second tier modifications that have been added are the addition of dedicated local commercial and affordable commercial space. And we also removed the eco-score incentives as it was duplicative of the LEED certifications.
Thank you, Dave. Next steps for the zoning code rewrite. The first is that we would like to hear from you. We have a project webpage that will allow you to make comments on the zoning code that is being proposed today. We also, pardon me, there we go. We also introduced a new tool just recently that will allow you to continue to make comments. So if you are a frequent user of the code or have ideas for improving the code, you will now find a comment tool through a form that is located on many of our zoning code pages. But for now, as we head into the formal review process, it is important for us to hear from you so that we can take your comments forward as we begin to propose the amendments in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will also hold a public hearing in which you can provide more comments. So that schedule is here. And as you see, there is a public hearing that is scheduled in September 8th. So I hope that you will visit our webpage and provide us your comments on the package. We do anticipate providing the planning, or not the Planning Commission, but the Technical Committee's package of amendments by the end of next Friday. That will allow the Planning Commission 2 weeks to review the package, and it will also give you an opportunity to review any changes that have happened since the last posting. And the last posting that you will find online today is staff's proposed amendments. Not many substantive changes have taken place between staff's proposal and the technical committee. It's more of refinements, but just in case, we will be posting the technical committee's recommendations on the 13th of this month. And with that, we'd like to open up this meeting to questions. And for those of you that have joined us in the house, this is a time when you can share your questions and comments directly with staff. So thank you all for being here today. So for those of you that are online, if you have any questions that you'd like to share with staff, I'd be happy to take them. You can type them in the comment room, or if you have the opportunity, you can raise your hand and share it verbally with us today. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat nor hands raised. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the presentation. And again, if you have any concerns or you want more clarification on what is being proposed for amendment, please reach out to us through the project webpage, or you can also contact me, Kim Dietz, at KDIETZ at redmond.gov. Thank you again for being here and have a wonderful day.